Good morning, everybody. Today's a great day. It's also one of my favorites with today being Military Appreciation Day. And you'll see a combination today of active duty soldiers, veterans, and their families. And this was just one of my favorite. Nobody does team better than our military. So I enjoy spending the time with them pre-practice and post-practice. So really cool day, and we're really pumped and honored to have everybody here today. So with all that said, let's get to some football with you guys too.
Hey, Dan. Couple O-line questions. First, Andrew Wiley, just what's the level of concern there? And
you'll see him out there today.
Okay.
So pretty low.
Okay. And you sort of mentioned this yesterday with some of the pre-snap penalties. At this point in camp, again, what's the level of concern? And then also, how do you kind of get the team past that?
Yeah, those are the ones that you really want to nail down, Nikki, the pre and the post-snap ones. So the pre-snap, encroachment or offsides or a false start. So if we can get those ones really dialed down, we'll get better. Now, as we're going through those, really defensively, with them jumping, I want to make sure we continue to work that through the cadences, because although there's some time to go through it, it's worth it. It can really be a weapon. So we're going to continue to work hard on it. So I wouldn't say I'm at a level of concern, but I would say it's more expect the expected until we get that discipline just right.
What details are you paying attention to on the first day of pads?
Well, I think really the line of scrimmage is where the emphasis is. One, I want to make sure we're doing it correctly. Our leverage of how we're, entering into a block or taking on a block, the pass rush. So you hear, coaches and others say about pad level. And so you can get into some bad habits and lose leverage if you're not using your shoulders and your body to be in those spots. So getting into those positions, the combination on blocks. So for me, the emphasis is mostly the run game, both sides, and pass protection and pass rush.
And it seemed to, at least to me, it seemed like Marcus has struggled to throw in rhythm, I guess, as often so far. Are you seeing that as well? And if so, why is that?
I thought really all the QBs are doing a nice job, not just throwing the ball, but playing the position, getting in and out of plays. And so part of Marcus's superpower is getting outside and being off rhythm. So you'll see different plays and different schemes as the quarterbacks play. So that will be one thing I'd keep an eye on moving forward.
I want to go back to the offensive line. There's a lot of guys moving around
Yes.
a lot of different ways. Could you kind of explain what we're seeing right now as you start to construct
Sure.
the offensive line?
Yep. And certainly at tackle probably is, we had maybe a little bit more movement over the last few days, but putting people at different positions, this is the time to explore some of that. Right tackle, left tackle, who's going to be into those spots, who may be a swing. We also do it, most of the guards can play center, and just about all of the centers can play guard. So it's not just a one hole, backup or spot. So like, for instance, you saw Dieter playing left guard, right guard, center. You've seen that with Nick to move at two spots, Brandon Coleman and others, Luke, to go into two spots. So it's worth it now to do those positions because you're exploring, you're finding out more information. Then you later get locked into one spot.
Hi, Coach. Over here. With the special teams unit, are you starting to see on the kickoff and the punt return guys that may be emerging in that area a little bit more?
I think punt and punt return, I'm feeling comfortable with what we've seen. Kickoff and kickoff return, you'll see some of that today, and just more reps, more time on task, more reps. So I'm not at the comfort level there yet because I think there's still some exploring that we're doing. High kick on the ground, double teams, not double teams. So those are the ones that I would say we're still exploring. I think people-wise, Donna, we might be able to know what's happening because on that play, it's a speed and a space play. So you've got to be able to block somebody in space or beat a block in space. So the speed on the kickoff and kickoff return, the ability to play in space, I think that's still the number one attribute.
Good morning, Coach. Obviously, with pads coming on, usually the aggression also kicks up. Do you have like a percentage of what, do you want them to go 70%, 60% today with the pads on just because you want to protect your teammates?
Yeah, I think the lesson, what we tried to show is this is a lot like sparring, where you're in control and never out of control. So doesn't mean you're closer to the quarterback or ever on the ground. So those are the things that we do to protect one another, contact that can be straight ahead as opposed to the side. So basically, Dave just put some rules of engagement in, and then from there. But if you're in front of somebody, we expect that thud to happen. But more than anything, I don't want to see what I have seen that I love is the effort and the finishing to go. So I want to make sure that stays high, with the same, contact element to it.
Absolutely. And we spoke to you before the practice yesterday, but full practice in the books with fans present. What do you think of the fan base?
Yeah, I thought it was really cool, and I was hoping to see that kind of energy and being here and the support. And so for my own first day of being here and realizing, just how important this connection is between the team, and the area, it was a cool first day for me.
Hey, Dan, good morning. Obviously, you played football. You know what it's like to put on pads again, right? For a lot of these guys, this is the first time they put on pads 7 and 8 months. What is that feeling like of, putting on the pads for the first time in a while and going out there and practice?
Yeah, I think it's that skill as well, because for the receivers, the DBs, so much of the passing emphasis that goes on. So now it shifts a little bit, to the line of scrimmage and pass rush and run game and, targeting and fitting blocks. So there definitely is a shift. The physicality part is a real thing because you want to test yourself and see where you're at, but also doing it in control. So we try to push it from the competition side, but still doing it safely for one another.
In terms of Johnny Newton, ramping him up, where do you see him progressing? Any limitations there in terms of going forward? How do you kind of ramp him up as camp goes on?
No limitations at all. So he's actually doing great. And then we'll start the team periods shortly with him. So he's making huge strides. He's in excellent shape. So it was more just by design. The players wanting to go badly and is showing he can, but really we want to stick to our plan of how we're ramping him up. And but yeah, you'll see him in some team work soon. Not as in like 30 minutes soon, but soon. Just for clarification.
We're going to be talking to Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner later. Obviously, as they get up there in their careers, there are things that people look at and say they can't do this anymore. What do you see from them that maybe they do some other things better or differently because of their experience?
Yeah, I think when you brought up Zach, the first thing that comes to mind for me is red zone. The precision, the details, because the coverage has changed down there of how you play man-to-man or how you play zone. It's just different. You're defending things laterally, but he has such a knack for understanding where those fit and how to do that. So I would say that's one of the things for me that fit for him in the red zone. And then for Wags, I would say so many times I'm looking for examples of tackling and tracking and how to do that. He's just one of the sure tackles. He has a great awareness for leverage and understanding angles. So that part of it, how do you train somebody to be a good tackler, and the traits, the behaviors, the techniques, that's one of the things that I really look to for Bobby. And I have for most of my career, wherever I was, to show examples of good tackling, he was usually on that tape.
And then only a few days so far, but what's your impressions of Emanuel, Forbes, and St. Juice working at corner?
Yeah, I think, and you've probably seen Michael Davis in that group as well with St. Juice, Emanuel, Michael. So the three of them are really working through it. And I think for some of the spots we've talked about there and tackle and some other positions where we're going to let it play and get into different competitions and different matchups and get to one-on-ones and all sorts of different ways to do our evaluations against other clubs. So some days you'll see, this two combination of guys, the next day the next two, and we're just going through the whole process to make sure, we're giving all the guys the real opportunity to compete. And John, that's really the theme of what we're doing. So I want to make sure, we're providing those opportunities to display that.
Hey, Dan, with regards to quarterbacks, in terms of the number to keep, I'm just curious, if you have in your head, I definitely like to keep 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and how does Driscoll, a veteran, and Sam Hartman, a rookie, factor into what you might do there?
You talking about for the final roster?
Yeah,
for sure. That's a good question. And that's one the AP can probably hit on with you as well. But not all the teams are using 2. All the teams are using 3. How does practice squad and elevations and that? There's some new guidelines regarding that this year. But all that said, I think there's such importance to the position, Ben, that you're always wanting to develop and keep pushing into that space and having people in the building that are kind of growing up within the program. So we've not made a determination yet about numbers, final roster, practice squad. But what I can say is I'm pleased with the group of 4 that we have here and the work that they're putting in. Not just throwing. That's That's a huge part of playing quarterback, but it's not the only part. It's playing the position, getting in and out of checks, what's the protection, decision making. So I've been pleased with what I've seen so far by the group. It's a fun group to coach.
And with regards to Jahan Dodson, just curious, like, as a guy who was obviously coaching against them last year, what was sort of your thoughts on him as a player, and what have you seen from him in camp? He obviously didn't have, he's admitted, not as good of a year as he had as a rookie. Where have you seen his progress, if you've seen progress so far here?
Well, I think, the first thing I think of with him is like really good ball skills. So like backhand, behind, like if it's in the catching radius, it's a pretty good shot that he's going to come away with it. I thought he's also a good route runner. So to set somebody up, to work a leverage and work back. So he's pretty savvy in that way. And so being around Bobby and having an understanding of, what it takes to play it, I've been pleased. And so when we get the ball in his hands, we're going to try to make plays and finish. And that's been one of the emphasis for a lot of the players after the catch, what takes place. And I'm hopeful that you see that at practice where guys are down the field finishing with them to say, hey, can we extend plays? And so that's one of the big emphases for him as well.
You ever done a press conference during a live concert, by the way?
What's that?
You ever
Yeah,
done a
it's
press
good.
conference?
I thought
Okay.
that was, you left your car on. It's good.
The kickoff rules changes are dramatic when it comes to these guys. You guys have played this game for so long. Do
Yep.
you think that everybody's up to speed on exactly what they're supposed to be doing, what they can and can't do?
I think in the big picture, yes. How does some of the other ones go where you had to think about, okay, how do you do it if, the wind blows the ball off the tee and there's no one back there? Like those are ones that you had to think about to say what would happen on that play. And so some of the rules that may have been added, not added on a rule, but like amendments that you say, okay, what are those things? So knowing after a penalty, what does that kick look like when you have to go back to the 30 or kick off after a safety where, you're kicking off from the 50. So like those ones aren't going to come up a lot, but when they do, you have to know what's the strategy then and how we're going to work through those. So I would say by and large, the big picture, yeah, people are understanding it, but the small nuances I think is still there.
Talked a little bit about the general tackle position, but for Brandon Coleman specifically, what have you seen from him so far? And obviously today's a big day when they first put on pads, but
Sure.
What do you want to see him kind of progress to as this training camp continues?
One of the things I knew he was a very good athlete, but what I have been more impressed by, even like he's got great balance for a big guy, and so he's got power in his legs, so one foot coming back, redirecting on pass rush stunts that could go. So that might be one of the things I didn't know was really one of his strengths. I knew he was a good athlete and movements and that, but balance is a harder thing to test. You have to see it. And so he is very rarely somebody that's out of position or on the ground. He's very deliberate in the way he moves and practices. So I think he's a very in-control player, and I think that's a real attribute as an offensive lineman. You never see him overextended or out of position because when you do get beat, usually somebody's out of position. It's hard to recover. He has that ability to stay connected to somebody, and that's one of the things I've been impressed by so far. So the question was regarding practice structure. And so, yeah, it's done really before I left. Most all of the practices were done. Some is ramped up by situation. Okay, we're going to get extra red zone work, extra third down. Padded days have a little bit more of like a team run and a play pass feel, so we can emphasize that part of the practice. So not everyone's the same, but I would say there's almost like a theme for every part of the practice. Today's competition, you'll see a 2-point play. We'll work more in the red zone and some team run and play pass, but that's a padded emphasis. So yeah, all of them have been done all the way up, through until we get to, where we're going against another team. And that way the coaches can also prepare what they want to emphasize during that day. The question was, is it collaborative or not? It's definitely collaborative, but I think you want to make sure if you work back all the things you want to start at the end, what do you want to get done? You have to start working back. How many practices of this? How many 2 minutes do we need? How many shots at goal line to get the team ready, in September? So you do have to go through the whole process. And as you're learning players and what they can and can't do, You may put in a defense or an offense or a scheme that you think is going to be there. No, that didn't work. And so not all the ones or ideas that you do go. But then there's also some ones that say, okay, let's do more of that. And so that usually happens 10 days from now after we get through about 8 or 9 practices of installing the offense, the defense, and the special teams. Then you can kind of go back and start reviewing it again. All right, you guys have a good one. See ya.